Mm-hmm.
So you get some from St. Anne's, you get some from Broxter,
Yeah.
and it's like a territory
Yes.
type of thing.
Yes.
And they
Yes.
got all these weapons and everything and chasing other people.
Yeah.
How do you think we can able to monitor that or put some young kids on the right path?
So I think it's early intervention. So the earlier we can support young people, the better. I think we need to raise young people's aspirations as well. And we need to create situations whereby it's not so easy to fall into the negativity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes when things aren't great at home, perhaps your only family is the friends that you find, you know, on road, as we say. So that can be one aspect of it. Drugs does play a part as well. It's a massive part of it. So, you know, that's how you break that down is a whole of the challenge, isn't it? But education, information, and I always say, what's your normal? Because if people think that the way to live is to live in these challenging circumstances, then maybe we need to have a different way of speaking and talking about these things to raise young people's aspirations, but also to give them something that they can go to. You know, if you think about it in a practical sense, if you can make a lot of money from selling drugs, but the alternative is that you go to a low-paid job, you know, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have to create better opportunities and prospects for young people, but also to help them to understand what the outcomes are of, you know, what it is that they're doing. And some of that might start with self-esteem as well, and loving themselves and, you know, trying to build a better future for themselves.
Do you think in the society we live in, because parents are always at work and busy, and, you know, I mean, at the moment people are working from home and we're constantly glued to our screens, and then children are obviously busy with their work and stuff like that, and that love factor is just missing. It's just completely, it's almost diminishing. Like, I'm seeing in a lot of cultures and families, like, people are not spending enough time with their children because they think they're at home. It doesn't matter. We don't have to actually, you know, play a board game or go for a walk in the park and all those kind of things. Do you think that's having an impact?
I think that's a wider societal problem, and I'd agree with you. Whether that impacts directly on the young people who are at risk of serious violence, I do know that perhaps where there's no dad in the family and maybe mum's got to be out at work all the time, you know, then that kind of creates more risk factors around a young person. But we have at the VRU, you know, I'm kind of talking off the top of my head, at the VRU we use an evidence base.
Yeah.
So I would need to really see the data about those
Yeah.
kinds of things. But, you know, from a personal perspective, I think, you know, there is a lot of challenges for families at the moment. And I think the online world does take us away from certain things, doesn't it? There's a lot of that. I don't think we know yet, you know, whether that's entirely a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe the world is just changing, you know, and as the world does have major changes from time to time. But I think what needs to concern us more is what we do know about the young people who are affected by serious crime and who are vulnerable to that. So, you know, there are things like where young people have been excluded from school, for example. That's a massive risk factor. So if we're going to have a focus, maybe it's about how we keep young people in school and how we understand the behaviours that are getting them excluded from school.
Yeah.
Young people, very often they might be in challenging family circumstances. That's another thing. They may have had trauma, because trauma is a big, big issue for us here in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. Some of the events I've been hearing about have been talking about some of that trauma as well. So we need to not normalise trauma, we need to understand it, and we need to look at ways in which we can, you know, reduce the incidences
why
of trauma.
is trauma higher in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and why is Nottingham always on the spotlight for knife crime? Because, I mean, even back when I was working in the council, my first day on a new job, there was 3 stabbings in the areas that I was going to be working in.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But that's the reality.
Yes. Yes.
So why is Nottingham always being mentioned? Is it really that bad?
I don't
compared
think
to
it
other
is.
cities?
No, I don't think it is bad compared to other cities. I think Nottingham got a bit of a reputation a few years ago. You know, you might remember when it was Shottingham.
Yeah.
So there was,
that's
and
right.
some of that. And the fact is we have been given this funding to be a VRU because there is, it is an area that has a high incidence of serious violence. It can be linked to deprivation. It may also be linked to the way that we live in Nottingham and what, the normalisation of certain types of behaviours as well. So the part of the role of the public health, the data people in our VRU is to look at all of those things and kind of drill down into them and find out, because it's a very complex picture a lot of the time. But for me personally, and I'll speak as an individual, there is a correlation to me between cuts and what's happened to young people and the services that provide for young people as well.
Youth services have practically
there's something like a
non-existent.
73% cut
that's
to
huge.
youth services, yes, and that's
I
across
was
the
a
country
youth
and
worker.
locally as well.
I was a youth worker, Jacqueline,
Yes.
so I speak from experience. And I remember when they were making those cuts, and I just felt we just all knew what was going to happen.
Well, we knew, didn't we? Because I was a community development worker to begin with, so we knew, and it was like it was just so horrific because you knew what the outcomes were going to be.
That's right.
But being helpless to do anything about it, and to think that, it may have contributed to the situation that we're in now.
Definitely. I would say it definitely has, because that's my personal viewpoint, Pam, because, as soon as you take away something and